Innovation is also a part of our story. Given what we see as a necessity, the Bahamas has led the world with the launch of its central bank digital currency. The sand dollar is a significant feat given the intensive regulatory and technical groundwork involved. It is premised on an absolute need to speed up the modernization of our payment system, to increase efficiency and access to financial services, and to lay a more resilient foundation on which domestic commerce can swiftly recover in any part of our scattered archipelago after a destructive climatic event. Nevertheless, as much as this is a time of celebration and reflection, it is also a time of planning for the course ahead. And we're all grateful to have you here on Caribbean soil, so to deliberate on common goals and to advance trade and investment across the expanded space of the African diaspora. Turning to our recent economic experience, the Caribbean is continuing to record healthy growth. According to the IMF's April 2024 World Economic Outlook, our economies grew by 8.3% in 2023, although this was a slowing from the 14% expansion achieved in 2022, it was still a growth path consistent with the unwinding of momentum which completed our recoveries from the COVID-19 pandemic. The recovery was impressive, even if we discount the meteoric gains in Guyana from the discovery of its oil reserves. And now growth is trending downwards, approaching its long-run potential for most of our countries. Haiti, which is still torn by conflict, is a stark exception that underscores both a regional resolve and an international push to achieve more lasting peace, stability, and prosperity in that country. The average regional growth outlook, while positive though, still faces significant downside risk given sustained geopolitical tensions and higher interest rates that central banks have imposed to curb inflation. Such developments have tempered global growth projections, and given the increased debt taken on during the pandemic, they further limit the capacities of Caribbean governments to finance the investments needed to bolster resilience and strengthen longer-term growth. Nevertheless, the Afreximbank outreach underscores the potential to increase trade and integration with the African continent and help bolster growth potential. According to an article co-authored by IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva, in the past 3 decades, the forces of trade and integration have contributed to a tripling in the size of the global economy and lifted approximately 1.3 billion people out of extreme poverty. However, that same article cautions that the poly-crisis environment in which we're in is undermining progress, threatening fragmentation, and reversal of these gains, or some of these gains. Again, forums such as these annual meetings that encourage innovations and progressive approaches to trade and integration are therefore critical.
Trade amongst us remains exceptionally low compared to intra-regional trade in other regions. Therefore, strengthening trade and investment flows amongst ourselves is a crucial step towards generational wealth creation. Also, deepening trade and investment flows will promote and enhance interconnectivity while contributing to our capacity to withstand global shocks. It is time to change the narrative. I know the task is enormous, but so is our resolve and courage. In our collective ambition and aspirations bound by unified conviction, we shall carry the mantle from our forebearers to make that dream of global Africa a reality. We must unite and change the course of our destiny and our economic fortunes. It is in this context that the theme of our 3-day meetings, owning our destiny, economic prosperity on the platform of global Africa is very apt. I'm hopeful that out of our deliberations over the next 3 days, we will deliver outcomes that will reinvigorate, re-energize, and equip us with a pragmatic strategic option in our quest for accelerated development and economic prosperity. I do acknowledge that we have many challenges confronting our development aspirations. I'm, however, deeply encouraged and gracefully hopeful that through hard work, collaboration, and effective utilization of our own resources, we shall have a proud legacy for prosperity. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have come to a point where we cannot afford to rely on the generosity or pity of others to continue to wait for non-maturing promissory notes in the form of aid and grants. The imperatives for our unity are enormous, as echoed in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 1963 by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, when he said, "We must unite or we perish."
ITC's newest research with Afreximbank, which we will soon publish, shows that trade between Africa and the Caribbean holds enormous potential. 1.8 billion for goods and services annually by 2028, to be exact. But we have a long road ahead of us if we're going to actually achieve that potential in practice, because getting to that number means getting rid of trade frictions and getting investments into the right sectors. I was on the bus this morning coming with one of the venture capitalists who set up in Jamaica. I was really happy to hear that, and I think he's already inked a deal with the Development Bank of Jamaica. So we're very happy to hear that. The past decade alone, for instance, shows that the share of African exports that goes to the Caribbean has been decreasing, not increasing. Today, less than 0.1% of African exports go to the Caribbean, and less than 3% of Caribbean exports go to the African continent. And looking past sheer volume, we can also see those exports in either direction remain far too concentrated in just a handful of sectors with little value addition, like unprocessed chemicals and minerals, despite all that these two regions have to offer. That's despite the potential that we see in exports like machinery, electricity, plastics, rubber, processed food products, and mineral products. And once again, it reflects our colonial history. It reflects the terms of trade that were established 400 years ago, and they haven't changed. And I think one of the fundamental decisions that we need to make as we move forward in planning for 2063, in planning for the future, is to undo those terms of trade. Too often, it's high tariffs and non-tariff barriers that are holding this export potential back. What's worse is that these barriers are often more pronounced for these goods that have undergone processing, meaning that value addition, which is critical for better jobs and livelihoods, becomes counterproductive once it's clear what exporters we face at the border. It shouldn't be that way, and it doesn't have to be. We must also do far more to boost services between the two regions, services trade. We already see how trade in travel, all of you are here, and transport services are doing relatively well, which, given the extraordinary cultural and culinary traditions our regions have and the beauty of their natural environments, should come as no surprise. There's a clear foundation we can build on. Trade agreements are one way to help bring down barriers and open new opportunities. We already have useful precedents that show us what works and what doesn't, and what can be improved, such as the economic partnership agreements in both regions with the EU. And while we need to come together to understand what an African-Caribbean trade framework could look like down the line, we can and must do more to improve economic integration with these two regions themselves, developing value chains further and seeing where the pain points are. It's why so many of ITC's projects in Africa and the Caribbean, whether it's our new project to support greater food security in the Caribbean or our long-standing projects to develop value chains in East and West Africa, are designed with these goals in mind. It's why we have a dedicated program called One Trade Africa to ensure that small businesses, especially those led by women and youth, can take full part in one of the most transformational trade agreements to be negotiated in a generation, the African Continental Free Trade Area.
The story of Africa is incomplete without acknowledging the contribution and struggle of its people, many of whom have been displaced through no fault of their own. One of the critical links in this global network is the relationship between Africa and the Caribbean. The ties between our regions run deep, forged through shared histories of colonialism, resistance, and the resistance. The Caribbean has also played a pivotal role in the struggle against apartheid, standing in solidarity with us in South Africa as our brothers and sisters. The first democratically elected president of South Africa, the father of our nation, Nelson Mandela, once said, "During my lifetime, I have dedicated my life to the struggle for African people. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and a free society in which all persons live together in harmony with equal opportunities." The Africa unity that Kwame Nkrumah spoke of isn't about political borders, but also about bringing the gap that divide us across oceans and continents. It is about recognizing that our destinies are intertwined and that our collective strength lies in unity. Reflecting on this journey thus far, it is evident that Africa has traversed great distances. Gone are the days when our continent was mired in conflict. Our continent was mired in disease, famine, shackled by the weight of its colonial past. Today, we stand tall amongst the many landscape of democracy, open economies, and relative political stability amongst our African continent. Yet, despite many of these strides we have made, challenges persist. Africa, comprising 17% of world's population, commands only just 4% of the GDP and mere 2% of world manufacturing outputs. Our share of the world trade stands just a mere modest 3%, a figure dwarfed by the intra-regional trade volumes in our continent. However, within the statistics lies a glimmer of hope. Intra-Africa export has seen a notable uptick, accounting for 16.3% of total trade in recent years. While this pales the comparison for the regions, it is also underscores the potential that lies amongst us within our borders. It is heartening to note that over the 3/4 of the trade that occurs within our regional blocs, it signals the growing intra-Africa economic ecosystem, which we should all be proud of, but also work very hard to ensure that this goes even higher. The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement marks a significant milestone in our quest for economic emancipation, aiming at creating a single market over 1 billion consumers with GDP exceeding $3 trillion. In its testament to our commitment of overcoming the barriers that have hindered Africa's full potential in the global economy.